A muffled cry echoed through the public library, like a silent plea for help. Between towering bookshelves and polished wooden floors, Madison Carter froze, her fingers gripping the handle of her baby's stroller. That sound didn't belong in this sacred space of pages and whispers, but something about it tore through her. She swallowed hard, her brown eyes scanning the shadows until she spotted a small figure curled up in the corner. A little boy, alone, hugging his knees. "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay? Are you looking for someone?" she whispered, kneeling down despite the aching in her back. Hours spent scrubbing offices that reeked of bleach hadn't taken away her gentle tone with children. The boy looked up, his tear-streaked face trembling as he tried to speak. I lost my dad." Madison felt something twist inside her. She didn't know his name, but she knew that kind of desperation all too well. What it meant to grow up with no ground under your feet. With no one around. Without thinking, she pulled a crumpled cookie from her jacket pocket and offered it to him, her calm smile hiding the storm inside. Emma, her 5-month-old baby, stirred softly in the stroller, almost as if she could feel the weight of the moment too. "It's okay, honey. I'll help you. Can you tell me your name?" "Aiden," he mumbled, taking the cookie with shaky fingers. Madison gently wiped his face with a tissue from her pocket. A simple gesture, yet filled with a tenderness she'd never received herself. Behind her, somewhere between the adult fiction shelves, something shifted. She felt it. A chill ran up her spine, an instinct whispering she was being watched. She turned her head slowly, and there he was, a tall man in a dark suit, standing still, watching. He said nothing, just stood there, and for a second their eyes met, and something hit her, hard, like two worlds crashing into each other without warning. She felt it, but she didn't understand. "Thank you, miss," Aiden whispered. The man disappeared between the shelves before Madison could react. But his eyes stayed with her, like a question she couldn't shake. What Madison didn't know was that this man wasn't just Aiden's father. He was someone whose past was tangled with hers, and he was about to turn her life upside down. What would you do if you were in Madison's shoes? Drop a comment, subscribe to the channel, and share this emotional story. The library had always been the only place where Madison could breathe without fear. While most people just saw books and silence, she saw refuge, a place where the world stopped demanding so much from her. After nights spent sweeping floors and scrubbing toilets in freezing office buildings, she'd push Emma's stroller between the shelves like gliding through dreams. Her body ached from exhaustion, but nothing hurt more than feeling invisible to the world. "It's gonna be okay, baby. Mommy's gonna figure it out," she would whisper, gently fixing Emma's blanket. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the weight her mother carried. Diapers were running low. Formula was almost gone. Rent? Already overdue. Meanwhile, miles away in a sleek glass penthouse overlooking the city, Sebastian Blackwood signed million-dollar contracts with a steady hand and tired eyes. His empire kept growing, but inside he was withering. Ever since he lost Clara, the only woman he ever truly loved, Sebastian had built walls of wealth to avoid feeling anything at all. And even as a father, Aiden felt like a distant planet he couldn't reach. "Would you like to schedule another meeting, sir?" his assistant asked. He simply shook his head. Instead of answering, a single image filled his mind. Madison, kneeling down, comforting his son with a tenderness he'd never managed to offer. Madison had never known a mother's love. Orphaned at 10, shuffled from one house to another, she had spent her whole life proving she was worth keeping. She learned not to cry, not to ask for too much, not to expect affection. Now, as a single mom with no safety net, she was doing the impossible with almost nothing. And still, she never said no to someone in need, as if saving others kept her from sinking completely. Outside, life rushed on, but inside the library, time seemed to fold in on itself. Madison kept thinking about how lost Aidan looked. So familiar it hurt. There was something about that boy that mirrored a part of her. What she didn't know was that the man in the shadows was Sebastian, Aidan's father, and the owner of the building where she cleaned bathrooms without ever knowing. That very afternoon, back in his office, Sebastian was digging through old files when he stumbled upon a faded envelope tucked between contracts. It hadn't been opened. "You need to know the truth about Clara," it said. Was Aidan's breakdown just a coincidence, or had the universe just cracked open a wound that never truly healed? Madison Carter knew exactly what it meant to carry the weight of the world without making a sound. At 26, she had no car, no degree, and no support system. But she had Emma, and that was enough to keep going, even when her body screamed for rest. Every step she took was a choice between despair and hope. And still, she smiled at others as if nothing was missing, as if the cracks in her chest weren't about to give in. Her brown hair was always tied up in a messy bun, hiding strands of premature grey, not from age, but exhaustion. The deep circles under her eyes told stories no one wanted to hear, but it was in her eyes that she carried her most beautiful trait. A stubborn spark, the kind found in someone who's lost everything and still believes in tomorrow. Between tissues stuffed in her pockets and a worn-out notebook, she kept a secret poet alive, writing just to remind herself that she too was made of beauty. "Mommy, will you read to me again?" Emma couldn't speak yet, but Madison pretended she could. Sitting on the colorful rug in the children's section, she flipped through picture books with Emma curled up against her chest. It was a ritual, a dream stitched together from pages she never had in her own childhood. Because even though she'd never truly been someone's daughter, she was determined to be the kind of mother the world never gave her. That blue-covered notebook tucked away in her bag was her safe place. In it, she wrote verses about roots that never took hold, homes that only existed in her imagination, and promises to a daughter who didn't yet know what the world could be. "I promise your story won't start where mine ended," she had written on a particularly hard morning. Meanwhile, from a distance, Sebastian watched. He didn't know her name, but he knew how to recognize something rare: kindness with no agenda. That woman comforted his son as if she already loved him, expecting nothing in return. In a life filled with cold meetings and calculated decisions, it rattled him. Who was she, and why did his heart react like it already knew her? Deep down, Madison felt something too. A chill when that mysterious man's eyes met hers between the shelves. It wasn't fear. It was more like a memory that wasn't hers, like that gaze had touched something she'd locked away a long time ago. "Miss, are you some kind of fairy?" Aidan asked the next day shyly when they met again. Madison laughed, slightly embarrassed. "No, but I like to believe there's magic in being kind." What is it about Madison that makes Sebastian feel at home for the first time in years? And why does she seem to carry a piece of his past without even knowing it? That morning, Madison woke up to the steady drip of the leaky faucet and the hollow hum of an almost empty fridge. Emma was crying from hunger before the sun had even risen, and the formula had been stretched thin for 2 days. Madison mixed the last scoop with a little more water than usual, whispering a quiet prayer that her daughter's tiny stomach wouldn't notice. "It's gonna be okay, baby. Mommy's gonna figure it out," she whispered, even though she had no clue how. When she arrived at the library, Emma bundled in a thin blanket. Madison knew something was off. Her head spun, her muscles ached worse than usual, and the fever was creeping in. But she couldn't stop, not today. Because if she didn't bring Emma there, she'd have nowhere else to rest. She had no one to watch her baby, not even for an hour. In the reading room, Aidan was already waiting, holding a book with a blue cover tight in his arms. "You came," he beamed, running toward her. Of course I did, kiddo. I wouldn't miss the next chapter of the dragon story, Madison replied, even though her legs felt like jelly. She read to him in a soft, weak voice, but with her whole heart. Between sentences and smiles, she buried the dread of not knowing how she'd pay the electric bill next week. The overdue notice was crumpled in her bag, right next to her poetry notebook. But in that moment, Aiden's smile meant more than any shut-off warning. From behind the shelves, Sebastian watched. He should have been in the boardroom of his corporate tower, closing a billion-dollar merger, but he couldn't walk away. Something held him there, the sight of that woman reading to his son with a tenderness he'd never learned how to give. She's got more power in that one gesture than I do with all my real estate, he thought, unsettled. His phone buzzed. It was his assistant, panicked. Mr. Blackwood, we need your signature right now or the deal's off. He looked at the screen, then looked back at Madison, and turned the phone off. That day, Sebastian realized he might have become a prisoner of his own success. That he'd spent his whole life piling up wealth to shield himself from feeling, and now, standing in front of a woman in a plain blouse with a tired smile, all those walls began to crumble. Emma suddenly burst into loud cries, startled by a nearby noise. Madison tried to calm her down, but there was no bottle ready. Aiden gently took her hand. "Want me to tell the story now, miss? So Emma can hear my voice instead?" She smiled, eyes glassy. "You're a very special little boy, you know that? How long can Madison keep hiding her pain behind a smile? And how long until Sebastian realizes that maybe love doesn't have to be earned? Maybe it just has to be recognized?" The next afternoon, Madison arrived at the library later than usual. The fever still clung to her body like a heavy shadow. But she didn't want to disappoint Aiden. She carried Emma in her arms. The stroller had broken the night before. Her feet throbbed, her hands were covered in calluses, but her desire to be there outweighed everything. She couldn't explain why, but that boy made her forget, even if just for a moment, how heavy life was. Aiden ran up to her, excited, holding a drawing in his hands. "I made this for you," he said, handing her the paper. It was a simple sketch, but deeply touching. Madison holding Emma, and Aiden holding her hand. "You drew us?" she asked, smiling through watery eyes. "Yeah, 'cause now we're kind of like a team, right?" She didn't even have time to respond before a deep, firm voice echoed through the library. "Aiden!" It carried a kind of urgency that made the boy flinch. Sebastian stepped out from between the shelves, as polished as ever, dark suit, gleaming shoes, but his eyes were cracked wide open. He saw Madison holding Emma, and for a brief second, his breath caught in his throat. Aiden ran to his father's arms. Sebastian pulled him in tight, but his gaze was still locked on her. Madison slowly rose to her feet, the drawing still in her hand. An awkward silence filled the space between them. She wasn't sure if she should smile or back away. He didn't know how to start. You found my son. Thank you," he said, voice lower now. "He just needed someone to listen," Madison replied gently. Sebastian hesitated, then pulled a business card from his pocket. "Can I return the favor somehow? Financial support, maybe? Anything you need?" Madison's cheeks flushed. Pride wrapped around her chest like a shield. It wasn't a favor. It was instinct. "I don't take money for doing what's right." As she turned to walk away, still holding Emma close, something slipped from her worn-out bag, a blue-covered notebook. Sebastian bent down and picked it up. One page had fallen open, revealing a handwritten poem. Broken roots still grow, even without soil. He stood frozen, like the words had cut straight through him. Madison disappeared between the shelves before he could return it, but the poem stayed in his hand like a sacred secret. Sebastian didn't know who she really was, but he knew what she stirred in him. And in that moment, for the first time in years, something inside him whispered for change. What will Sebastian do with that notebook? And did Madison realize that by comforting a lost little boy, She had unknowingly cracked open the door to her own forgotten past. Sebastian held the blue notebook like it was a fragment of his own soul. He spent the entire night reading Madison's poems, trying to piece together the heart of a woman he barely knew, yet somehow felt connected to. There was something about the simplicity in how she felt things, the courage to write about pain so tenderly, that made him question every decision he'd ever made. On the back of the final page, barely visible, Monsieur Carter. By the next morning, he had put his resources to work. In under 2 hours, he knew where Madison worked. Night shift, janitorial staff, at one of the commercial buildings owned by his own holding. The truth hit him like a slap to the face. While he sipped coffee from porcelain cups, she scrubbed floors with bleeding hands. He felt ashamed, and more than that, he felt responsible. At midnight, he pulled up quietly in front of the building. From a distance, he watched Madison cleaning the halls, earbuds in, Emma asleep on a folded blanket nearby. Her movements were slow, deliberate, exhausted. Nothing about it was dramatic, and maybe that's what made it so brutal. This woman was surviving in silence while the world kept looking away. "What are you doing here?" he whispered to himself, baffled by his own decision to be there. The next day, Madison got an unexpected visitor at the library. It was Sebastian, dressed more casually this time, his expression softer, more human. He held the notebook in his hands, and something else on his lips. "I read your poems," he said. "They're painfully honest. I wanted to return this in person." She blushed. "You weren't supposed to read them. They're just messy thoughts." "Maybe. But they say more about you than any resume ever could." Emma started crying. Without thinking, Sebastian knelt down and gently rocked the stroller. "You know what you're doing?" Madison asked, surprised. "Not really, but I'm trying to learn from you," he said, his voice so soft it caught her off guard. Aidan arrived moments later, bubbling with excitement. He insisted on sitting beside Madison during story time. Sebastian watched them closely. The three of them looked like they belonged together, framed inside an invisible painting time had never dared to finish. He felt homesick for something he'd never even lived. In the days that followed, Sebastian began visiting the library more often. He claimed he was researching emotional intelligence and children's literature, but really, he was seeking shelter. Madison slowly stopped seeing him as the untouchable tycoon. There was a boyish loneliness in his eyes she knew all too well. But even as their encounters grew warmer and the conversations longer, Madison kept her guard up. She knew what it meant to fall for a dream, only to watch it fall apart. "You come here a lot now?" she asked one day, teasing. "I think I come for you," he replied with more honesty than she expected. Can Madison truly trust someone who represents everything that once broke her? And how far is Sebastian willing to go to prove he's not just another powerful man trying to erase his guilt with empty promises? It was late at night when Madison stepped into the boardroom to clean. The building was nearly empty, except for one light still glowing at the top floor. Emma slept in her stroller, and the young mother began sweeping in silence, just like every other night. But something about the room felt different. A slightly open drawer on the glass table caught her eye. Curious, Madison nudged it open without thinking. Inside were papers, an expensive pen, and a photo. The world stopped. In the picture, a younger man smiled beside a woman. She wore a blue dress, her wavy brown hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes a deep, familiar brown. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. Madison's legs buckled. "Who is she?" she whispered, clutching the photo. On the back, written in elegant cursive, "Clara and Sebastian, summer of 1996. Before she could process it, the door creaked open. Sebastian walked in, startled to see her there. "Madison, what are you doing?" She held up the photo. "You tell me. Who is this woman? Why does she look so much like me?" His silence was the loudest answer. Sebastian slowly approached the table. His eyes didn't show surprise, only guilt. "Her name is Clara. She was the love of my life, and your mother." Madison stepped back like he'd hit her. "You're saying you're my father?" He tried to move closer, but she took another step back, eyes filling with tears. "You knew this whole time? You watched me, got close to me, and said nothing?" "I wasn't sure. Not until I read your poems. Not until I saw you with Aiden. It felt like Clara had come back. No, don't turn this into poetry. You left me. You knew, and you stayed silent," Madison shouted, her voice breaking between sobs. Emma began to cry too. It was all too much. She ran out, holding her baby tightly, leaving behind her bucket, broom, and the notebook she'd tucked back into her bag days ago. Sebastian picked it up from the floor, hands shaking. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, just never imagined it would hurt like this. Outside, Madison waited for the elevator, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. "Why now? Why didn't you come for me before?" she whispered to herself, crumpling the photo in her pocket. From the top floor, Sebastian watched the elevator descend, powerless, feeling like he had just lost the only real thing fate had ever offered him. Can Madison forgive the man who denied her a history, or is the weight of the past simply too heavy to carry? Madison didn't sleep that night. Sitting on the floor of her tiny apartment, Emma in her arms, she stared at the peeling walls like they were mocking her hope. The photo of Clara and Sebastian sat crumpled on the table, impossible to ignore. Her mother, her father. Why hadn't anyone fought for her? You knew, and you stayed quiet, just like everyone else, she whispered through clenched teeth. The next morning she dragged herself to work, her throat sore and her body aching. She refused to miss her shift, not out of pride, but out of survival. Emma needed diapers, and Madison needed something to focus on before the pain drowned her. With every floor she cleaned, she tried to scrub away the memories Sebastian had stirred up, the rejected little girl, the lonely teen in group homes, the forgotten birthday. On the stairwell, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rosa, stopped her. "Sweetheart, your eyes look so sad. How about some tea?" Madison tried to decline, but gave in. They sat together on Rosa's floral couch, and while Emma slept in her lap, the old woman spoke as if she'd known Madison's heart forever. "Family isn't just blood, honey. It's who stays, who doesn't run when you fall apart." Madison cried quietly, and for the first time, she didn't feel ashamed. Moved by that conversation, she opened her notebook again. Her hands still trembled, but the words began to pour out like a river that could no longer be held back. She wrote about roots growing through cracked stone, about mothers fighting in the dark, about daughters who learned how to be enough. "You're not gonna break me, past, and neither will you, Sebastian," she whispered. Meanwhile, Sebastian visited the library, without saying who he was. He donated a generous amount anonymously, launching a reading program for vulnerable kids in Clara's name. It was his way of apologizing, silently. He also began picking up Aiden from school every day, trying to trade absence for presence. A few days later, Madison returned to the library with Emma. She was done running. She saw the new project being promoted, Clara's Story Club for Children. The name made her heart skip a beat. She sat in the corner and cried quietly. She didn't know Sebastian was behind it, but something about that gesture healed her a little. Aiden ran to her when he saw her. "You came back. I waited. I had to find myself first, buddy," she said, kissing the top of his head. In that moment, she realized some wounds don't heal with time. They heal with reunion, even painful ones. Sebastian saw her from afar. He didn't come closer, but he smiled. It was a step, a beginning, and for the first time, he understood that maybe he didn't need to be forgiven right away. He just needed to stay. Is Madison ready to see the man behind the mistake? And is Sebastian willing to love without rushing, give without expecting, and wait, even without promises? It was Saturday. The library was busier than usual, filled with kids sitting on colorful cushions and parents whispering among themselves. Madison didn't know why she came. She just felt she needed to be there. There was something different in the air, a quiet tension, like the stillness before a storm. Emma was asleep in her stroller when Aidan ran up to her, waving a new drawing. "It's us, me, you, Dad, and Emma," he said proudly. Madison looked at the paper, her heart stumbling in her chest. We look like a family," she whispered, tracing the crayon outlines. "That's 'cause you make us feel like a family," he replied, with the kind of innocent honesty only kids can pull off. That afternoon, Sebastian found the courage to do something he'd been holding back. He asked Aidan to give Madison an old yellowed envelope with delicate feminine handwriting on it. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was a letter written by Clara, her mother. The handwriting was the same as the dedications in the book she'd clung to since childhood, the only things that survived group homes and foster care. "Sebastian, if there's still a heart inside you, take care of our daughter. Her name is Madison. She deserves love, even if it doesn't come from me. I tried to fight, but your family took everything from me." The letter was dated just before Madison was born. "She tried to protect me," Madison murmured, tears welling up. "My mum, she never gave up on me." Sebastian approached slowly, his voice barely there. "They kept everything from me, Madison. My mother intercepted every message she ever tried to send. I was a coward, yes, but I was also lied to, for years. I only found that letter weeks ago. It was buried in my father's old files." And Madison clutched the paper to her chest. She cried silently, like someone letting go of a pain too old to name. "I blamed her for so long, thought she'd left me, but she was just silenced. And I failed both of you," Sebastian said, eyes filled with regret. Aidan walked over, uncertain. "Are you sad, miss?" She knelt down, wrapping him in a hug. "I am, but I'm also starting to understand," she whispered. Emma stirred in the stroller, as if sensing the shift in the air. That day, Madison's anger didn't disappear, but something gave way, like a rusty door finally swinging open. She looked at Sebastian, and for the first time saw not the man who was absent, but the man who had also been left behind by a cruel system and a family of locked doors and quiet shame. Can Madison turn this new truth into forgiveness? Or will the past still hold enough weight to pull them apart before something real can grow? Madison took a deep breath before opening the door. The smell of stale coffee and worn-out sheets filled the tiny apartment, but this was where she felt safe. For the first time, she invited Sebastian into her world. Not the world of glass buildings and English boardrooms, but hers, stained walls, baby photos taped to tiles, books stacked on the floor. Here, she was real. Sebastian walked in silently. He took in the space with respect, not judgment. "This where the magic happens?" he joked, voice cracking. "This is where I fall apart and put myself back together," Madison replied, blunt and honest. They sat across from each other, Emma asleep in a makeshift crib beside them. Madison didn't beat around the bush. "You owe me more than an apology. You owe me time, answers, and a chance to say everything I've kept inside for 26 years. "Then say it," he answered. "All of it. I'm here to listen, not defend myself." So, she let it all out. She spoke of birthdays in strangers' homes, hugs that never came, the nights she dreamed of a mother who lived, and a father who might still exist. "I didn't need your money, Sebastian. I needed a dad, someone to tell me I mattered, even when I felt invisible." Sebastian cried, not out of guilt but pain. the pain of finally understanding just how much had been lost. I was weak. I let others decide for me. And when I lost Clara, I ran from everything that reminded me of her, including you. But I'm here now, even if you never call me Dad. I don't know if I can, but I'm trying, she admitted, and that alone was massive. Emma's cry broke the tension. Sebastian stood before Madison could, lifting the baby gently into his arms. You know how to calm her. Clara taught me a lullaby. When Aiden was born, I tried to remember it. I think Emma likes it. He hummed softly, and the baby quieted, nestling into his chest. Madison watched, her heart torn between hurt and hope. The door creaked open. Aiden walked in, holding a book. Can we read together today? Madison looked at Sebastian, then at the children, and for the first time she said the word with a mix of fear and tenderness. We can. Family's that too. Trying. Even when it still hurts? Aiden asked. Especially when it still hurts, she said. Will Madison be able to move forward with this fragile new beginning? Or will those barely healed wounds bleed again before the ending rights itself? The days that followed moved slowly, as if time had finally learned to match the rhythm of the heart. Madison still woke up before sunrise, like always. But now something was different. A small note on her door. Good morning. Your coffee's in the blue thermos. S. A small gesture, but it said so much. Sebastian didn't push. He offered. And waited. She still didn't call him Dad. She didn't know if she ever could, but she welcomed his presence with a little less fear. Story time at the library became a new ritual for Aiden and Emma. They sat on the colorful rug, laughing together like they'd always been siblings, and maybe, where it mattered most, they were. Do you think she'll call you Grandpa someday? Aiden asked, making Sebastian laugh and blush. I'd be happy with just Uncle Seb for now, he replied honestly. Madison started writing again, not just at night, but in any quiet moment the world allowed her. She took part in a local reading event, hands trembling as she stepped onto the stage. She read a new poem aloud. Not all roots grow in soil. Some bloom in the chest, in absence, in the courage to begin again. The room fell silent. Sebastian, sitting in the last row, quietly wiped his eyes. After the event, an editor approached her. Have you ever thought about publishing? She froze. She had never dared to dream that big. But for the first time, she felt maybe she could. I'm starting to think about it, she replied with a shy smile. At home, Emma crawled with more strength, and Aiden drew stories on the floor. Madison laughed more. Even when money was still tight, Sebastian offered to help her set up a small community press to give voice to other women like her. But he waited for her to say yes. No pressure, no savior complex. I don't want to save you, he told her. I want to build something with you. She simply nodded. And that was everything. Their conversations deepened. They talked about Clara, about what could have been and what still could be. Madison hadn't completely forgiven him. But with each act of listening, each step forward, another brick fell from the wall between them. You think there's still hope? There is. As long as there's an open book and a child listening, there's always hope, she said. Sebastian officially founded the Clara Carter Foundation, supporting single mothers and vulnerable children. A strong woman's name, a story of second chances. At the launch event, Madison read another poem about never knowing her mother, but recognizing her every day in the woman she was becoming. But would this fragile bond survive the last secret Clara had left behind, now arriving in the hands of a stranger? It was a sunny afternoon, the kind where even the wind feels lighter. Madison walked slowly through the cemetery, Emma in her arms, and Aiden gripping her hand tightly. Sebastian followed behind, carrying white flowers. They stopped at a simple gravestone. Clara Carter, a mother, even without the chance to be one. Madison stood in silence for a long time, staring at the name of the woman who brought her into the world, and was taken away before she ever got the chance to be her mother. She pulled an envelope from her bag, not a letter, but a poem. She folded it carefully and placed it on the grave. "Thank you for not giving up on me. I found what you wanted to give me, even if it took a while," she whispered. Sebastian stepped closer, placing a hand gently on his daughter's shoulder. "She'd be so proud of the woman you are." Aidan, curious as ever, wandered over to a stone bench, where he spotted an elderly woman sitting with a book in her lap. She watched them with misty eyes. "Did you know my mom?" Madison asked gently. The woman nodded. "I was a nurse at the hospital where Clara stayed toward the end. Before she passed, she asked me to keep this safe." She handed Madison an old journal, burgundy leather, Clara's name written in gold ink across the cover. Madison held it like a relic. Her hands trembled. They all sat down on the grass under the shade of a tree. She opened the first page. "If my daughter ever reads this, I want her to know I fought. Every one of your tears was once mine. And even though life tore us apart, my love never needed presents to exist." The words hit Madison like a long-delayed embrace. She cried softly, her fingers gliding over the pages. Clara had written about Sebastian, about the letters never delivered, about the hope that one day father and daughter would find their way back to each other. "You two are my root and my sky," one of the final pages read. That afternoon became a kind of ritual, a farewell, and a beginning. As they left the cemetery, Madison stopped beside Sebastian. "I forgive you, not because I forget, but because I carry the part of me that comes from you, and she deserves to bloom too." He didn't respond. He just held her, no rush, no resistance. Emma nestled between them, Aidan holding hands, and the wind whispering invisible verses through the branches. At the curb, before getting in the car, Madison smiled. "Shall we go home?" "Yours or mine?" Sebastian asked. "Ours," she said. "Just like that. Have you ever lived something like this? Or seen it up close? Tell me your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. And in the next video, you'll meet someone who had to choose between forgiveness or disappearing forever. I'll see you there.